Hello, story seekers. I'm Nico.
I'm Ben, and welcome to the Tiny Bookcases Novella Writing Month mini-series.
February is the shortest month, so we've decided to write something longer than usual in it.
We're also, quite crucially, writing the novella together, a first as we've not written something substantial with each other before.
Last week, you've heard us drilling into what we want from a novella and discussing the approaches to co-writing.
This week, we're here to read an excerpt for you and discuss what went wrong and what went right about our approach to the beginning.
So let's jump straight in with that excerpt. Ben, hit it.
The elves were the first to wonder about the circumstances of the world, long before they were gone from it. They grew to believe that the sphere they occupied had grown from a great tree, the roots of which drank starlight and gave succour to the first of their kind, filling them with magic. The humans, gazing at the blazing ripples of the nebula in the night sky like wondrous children, imagined the idea of a great whirling orb to which the seas, mountains, and people clung effortlessly. Dwarves do not need to believe or imagine. They know that the world rests atop a great anvil where the hammers of the forge masters beat and work it to their design. Sparks from the strikes shine clearly in the night sky, scattered into the endless forge with each hammer blow. They know that one day the forge masters will turn everything onto its belly and begin to beat the other side, until finally all things are flawless. Or they will return the failed attempt to the crucible of molten metal that is the sun and start anew. What then does the planetary handiwork look like now? A decayed patchwork of once farmed land lies undisturbed across the lowlands of the anvil world. Here and there, the rubble of spike-towered cities and the husks of stout drum keeps tell of a time when the world was other than it is, when roads were useful and life was, for some, predictable. It is where the humans once were, a people from another world who had thrived in their new home. They had eaten the land, hewn the trees, and dammed the rivers, imposing an otherworldly order on what should have been wild. The dwarves once sang songs to tell the tale of the birth of humanity. Their pickaxes and shovels had led them along veins of purest iron to the heart of their tallest mountain. No work made of that iron in their forges could be undone. Dwarf-wrought iron could not be blunted, notched, or brought to rust. They dug hungrily, heedless as they emptied the mountain, and did not stop until they reached the root of the veins. There they discovered the gate, a dormant aperture to another world. Igniting it with fire from their forges, the dwarves called through it, their words forming a bridge to the other side. The people who came through in answer to their call were uncomplicated and as unready for the world as children. The dwarves gave them the knowledge of masonry and showed the humans a way to the light of the surface, their new home. Elves, forced to share the land they had claimed to govern since the first tree sprouted, were incensed by the human desire to exploit the natural order of the world. They considered the brevity of human life to be so slight that the value of their lives could be measured against the most pernicious of weeds. Yet, with the aid of the dwarves, humanity prospered, and the immortal minds of the elves grew perverted by the pursuit of savage reprisal. In secret, they sought to stifle the expanding influence of the interlopers. Season by season, their whispers pushed the land to rebel against the newcomers. Trees grew treacherous, winds blew colder, and the rivers became unruly. Dredged from those drying riverbeds, whose banks were choked with the exposed and impotent roots of felled trees, the forgotten trolls awoke from their imprisonment. Implacable hunger gnawed at those creatures, and their hearts raged like forest fires, with the carnivorous desire to consume all they could see. With every morsel of flesh they tore from the abundant humans, the trolls grew hideously large in stature. Every troll can make another without the need for breeding or gestation. Such was the nature of them. They did not ponder the anvil world. knowing only their furious hunger, and instead grew more and more of their kind from their bodies, each new terror leaping forth fully formed to tear and devour. Their claws began to curl around the edges of every map, daring even to tread on elven land and besiege dwarven holdfasts. In those dark days, humanity was fractured, and the last true dwarf king gathered his thanes to defend the gate within the hollow mountain. Yet it was the elves who struck the decisive blow, indelibly scorching the world with their passing. The 7 monarchs of the elves, drawn together from each corner of the great tree, amassed their strength. It was by their hand that the trolls had been sealed beneath the rivers, in the time before dwarven history began, and the fury they felt at their work being undone disregarded every boundary of reason. They called upon the magic of their people to conjure themselves mighty new shapes capable of defeating the trolls once more. Yet their minds were corrupted with the desire to remove humanity, and the transformed monarchs became single-minded beings of entropic darkness. Elfkind died that day, consumed by their spiteful creations. Those huge beings of death stalked forth to pull the life from the lowlands where the humans had made their home. Entire cities, fortified against the troll threat and filled with huddling refugees, were reduced to dry, empty ruins by the merest touch of the giants. The trolls, their prey stolen from them, fled to the revenging darkness to cannibalize one another in their exile. Implacably, the giants pushed on towards the spine of dwarfdom's gutted mountains, seeking the gate. With untold destruction, they brought the hollow mountain down upon it, sealing the portal and destroying all those who protected it. The fractured remnants of the dwarves are all that truly remains of the old world. This is their story.
Kin. Pages from the journal of Murmur of the Adult Father, known to the humans as Aemond. While I should feel shame to have grown in such a manner as Murmur has, so far removed from those I deserve to call kin, I am not moved by it. More so than ever, I believe that the old ways are gone, and that new philosophies must be forged. To that end, I have oiled the palm of Gareth Ansell, a known thief and liar. He is now, perhaps, the richest librarian to draw breath. If Murmur's instincts are to be trusted, and I must heed them when reading this back, it was in fleeing the Deadlands that Hansel seized up these guarded records. I believe him to be a tomb robber. If I can prove it, Murmur shall return and mark his flesh with his crimes, and retrieve my riches. As to what Murmur has found, the forge fires of the dwarven royal lines are nearly extinguished. Ring of the Hammer's song bore no infants, and she was slain in combat. Spark that lights the forge fire was crushed with her family beneath the hollow mountain long ago. Bello, as the cave falls, and his daughter were eaten by trolls when they ventured above ground. Only one line remains. Whilst Blaze atop the quenching oil has indeed perished, and his wife, Crackle of the home hearth, has aged to her final rest, their sons live on. Yet, the succession is complicated, as the two are twins. As such, they seek to augury the question of who should be king. This is an ancient dwarf custom, respectable, but foolish, given the dangers they must face to acquire one. A simple geode will decide the fate of what remains of the dwarven kingdom. I find that truth fitting in a part of my mind I thought might never have truly existed. It is that small, underdeveloped nodule within Murmur's skull which is filled with the need to dig, to share my knowledge, and to sing the ancient songs. These twins First glint of light on the jewel's surface and rumble of a sliding rockfall have already sallied from places holdfast on their misguided quest. Perhaps I can intercept them. So much knowledge has been lost to the true dwarves that Murmur's mind must be a worthy barter token. I fear, though, that they will be dullards, and the truth will not slow them in their quest. Are they not, after all, dwarves? Is Murmur a dwarf? Or is Murmur something else? I have found another collection of words I could not translate among those documents. Through my expansive cleverness, Murmur can guess at the gaps, but it is though the absence of knowledge bleeds from the markings. The runes rob those around them of intention and leave great holes in the documents that can no more be filled than the hollow mountain's collapsed peak can be raised again. The few dwarves I have met above ground were of no use to my efforts to translate these obscure documents. The words, they claim, are lost and have been replaced with rough loan words from Gatespeak. The human language is brutal in its alacrity of thought, reliant on context, and prone to misunderstandings. That rough vagueness is what serves the humans so well in their dealings, but it does not aid me. Perhaps it is true, and those words are gone forever. The very structure of the dwarven tongue is like a mine, for which some of the crossbeams and supports have vanished. Without them, whole tunnels of words collapse. Conceivably, I might dig a root through and unearth them, or I will do no such thing, and let their whole wretched kingdom falter again and again until it eats itself. Stone will grind against stone until nothing but powder remains. Will that drag me along with it? When the world beneath the rock is just as drained of life as the world above it? Where then can Murmur live? On that, I again saw scars of death upon the lowlands. It took Murmur walking these blackened pits, measuring with cartographer's art to see their true shapes. Some were like great hoof prints, while others appeared to be made by monstrous paws. A great swathe of the land around them was dead. There is no other word for it. I saw great furrows of upturned grey dirt, and rivers containing neither life nor even decay. It was as though two colossal drunken sots had clashed, the way the land is turned about. But those sots, if Murmur measured their feet correctly, would stand 1,000 feet high. An impossibility. If such a thing were to live on these lands, there would be witnesses. Or, conceivably, there the terror of their passing leaves none to speak of it. Murmur, you shall have yourself dead, should you pursue what you are contemplating. But it will be no true loss to the dwarves, will it? I write this so that any who finds it will be warned. There are things that no one speaks of. Perhaps because they do not know. Words die, and Murmur suspects he knows what killed them. The shadows grow too long. If the wheat turns grey, if water runs as dust in your mouth, The braying of your livestock becomes to shrieks, then silence. Run. In my life, I have stared into the deepest mine, walked beneath the crumbled mountain, and gazed into many moonless nights. I know now that none of those were true darkness, but instead a species of hopeful gloom in which eyes might find some life, given time. Let me say, then, that when I saw the giants, the sight of them drank the seeing from Murmur's eyes. The giants are real, and they drink life from everything. They kill indiscriminately, without the use of fangs or claws. Their darkness does not permit what has nerved them to live. Mark the coming of their heralds, if you wish to survive. The knowledge of them consumes Murmur. I do not wish to wither until I am nothing. I cannot allow more knowledge to die with me. All courage has fled my belly. I must cease my scrawling. Murmur hears the soft clanking of the herald approaching again. Live another day. We must relight the forges. Only then can we fight the dark.
Fucking A. I had no idea you were going to do that voice. That was so absorbing.
I don't think I knew either until I started reading it. I think that's one of the first reflections I can say on writing together.
Yeah.
Is that a lot of the time when I'm writing alone, I will say the dialogue out loud as I'm writing, and I've not done that here because it's kind of going back and forth.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it meant that until I started speaking, the voice just came when it came. I was like, okay, that's how he sounds. And that was fun. It was a fun moment of discovery.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. It really worked. I mean, I think when we were writing that section, that was going to be quite it's quite an odd internal monologue, isn't it? This like switching between first person I and third person self-referential. Murmur talking about Murmur.
Yeah.
But yeah, you really brought it. You really brought it there, like really solidly. That was great. Really enjoyed that a lot. So obviously, as people might be able to tell, this is going to form the prologue section of the novella. It almost feels a bit indulgent to have a prologue on a what's already a short thing, but but I think our intention is to use it in order to basically do some of the world building that we won't have the word space for later on in the novella.
I mean, we are nothing if not indulgent. You know that. I felt it even more when reading it than I did when we've been going back and forth on it. But the sort of soft love letter to Tolkien
Mhm.
in that first section, somewhere betwixt drums in the deep, they're coming, and the way that Gollum and Smeagol talk to themselves.
Yeah, yeah. I found myself having to pull away from delivering it a bit like Galadriel delivers the opening in the movie, in the Peter Jackson movies. But another ring was
I
forged.
feel it in
Yeah,
the air.
exactly. Yeah. Um,
If you'd pulled that voice out, I would have been so impressed.
just gone full Kate Blanchett. That would have been fantastic. No, you were stuck with me, I'm afraid.
Get her in.
Um, yeah, I mean, it's not the only influence there. We go on and on about Tolkien, but we also go on and on about Pratchett, and
We
I
do.
think it's pretty clear that we were coming from a point of view where we were trying to pay a bit of homage to the greats that have in many ways shaped the way that we approach storytelling. So this isn't necessarily normally the way that I would do a prologue, but I'm really glad that we did it this way. Um,
Yeah.
I think they're still rough. I think there's still sections that maybe there's some like duplication of world building occasionally, and little bits that I would want to refine and things like that. But I'm pretty happy with this. I think it's a start. It's an
Yeah.
intro into the world. Like, obviously, we know what comes next because we've already written some of it. But I think this puts
Yeah.
us in a really comfortable place and an exciting place to get stuck into the meat of the story. But
I
yeah,
think so. Especially because hearing you read it, I got a real sense of. I don't know if you've watched any of Avatar: The Last Airbender,
I have not.
but the way that the opening monologue at the beginning of every episode kind of G's me up.
Oh yeah,
I got
okay,
that same feeling,
yeah.
and it made me very excited about the world, even though I know about it
Mm.
already. To get it in that sensation was very cool. So I think even though there's a good chance some stuff will be trimmed out or reshaped, I think it has that right. This is the world, and this is someone in that world, and you get a little bit of omnipotence because you are the reader and you exist outside, but the narrator does not. So here they come.
Mm.
I think that's
Yeah,
fun.
no, I agree. Yeah, this concept of opening a story this way isn't something that I would normally do, as I've said. But I also don't
Yeah,
often write like very high fantasy. Like it's interesting to be in a new, not a new, but like in deeper water in something that I'm reasonably comfortable with as a consumer, or maybe occasionally writing the a short story here and there. But that was just the prologues is already 2,000 words. So we're
yeah,
so far beyond the normal scope of the storytelling that we do, um, that it's good. It's good to have a swing partner. I think. Um,
yeah. I think especially it does give you that real sense of this is why fantasy novels are fucking gigantic.
yeah, because you've got to build a world and tell a
Because
story
the
in
prologue is 2,000 words, and we've done the quick version.
it. Yeah, yeah. I think that's why it's got to do double service, isn't it? It has to start building up some
Yeah,
character. Um, like that first one that's very Pratchett-esque. That sort of descriptions of the world from different points of view. Um,
yeah,
it does a lot to help people understand where the setting is, but
yeah,
doesn't yet like begin to work the characters. It doesn't have it in an exact time in an exact place. Whereas the sort of the journal entries, the sort of paratext that we're opening with the prologue, um, do start to do that. And then, of course, chapter one, as we know, we're in the full swing of full narration, full storytelling. Uh,
yeah.
so yeah, I'm excited. I'm excited about it and what we've done with it so far. But what did you? I mean, I found plenty to struggle with, and I'm sure you did too. But
Yeah.
like, what's the sort of the main thing that you struggled with here? Whether it's to do with this particular story or our co-writing approach, because we discussed it at length
I think
last week, didn't we? What we were going to try and
yeah,
do.
I think a big part of it is I mean, initially I can say it's because I'm an evening writer and you're a morning
Yeah,
writer, which definitely has an impact because you're like, hey, have you got the mind for this? And I'm like, no,
give me
it is the
give me
morning.
12 hours.
And then I'll like 9 p.m. I'll be like, hey, I've got this idea, and you're like, no, 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 no.
I have switched
But
off for the day. What are you doing?
so I did my brain stuff
Yeah,
earlier,
yeah,
but I think that those first kind of tentative steps into writing the story, I had just assumed because when we write together collaboratively, short form, but on a call or in the same room, we can kind of rapid fire, bam, 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 bam,
yeah.
bam, stuff back and forward. But taking a big first step into the world on your own, but also knowing that you're like, do I need to get this cleared and because it's not my story, it's our story. So I don't want to make a decision
Mm,
that might then that you don't like or that we haven't discussed. And And I think those first couple of like stumbling steps to find its feet, and I think we actually are starting to actually get our feet under us and say, okay, I think I can write a chapter
Mhm.
and not be precious about it. And if you're like, oh, that's I really like this bit, but I don't think that actually works in the meta
Yeah.
narrative, then we can just lob it out. But yeah, those first couple of runs at it, it is very. Oh, I don't want to get it wrong, I guess is the right way to say
Yeah,
it.
I get that. I think potentially we should just like really clearly explain what we actually ended up doing, because we spoke last week about like
Yeah,
different approaches, but what happened was we had a couple of world building sessions where we had some calls and really went into some characters that we liked, some themes that we wanted to explore, some what has to be said, some really fun sessions of just breaking the world down, like thinking about all the cool shit in
yeah,
there. That was a lot of fun. Um, we then deployed some writing techniques, some writers' aids, you might say, which I'd been thinking about using for a while. One of which I'd used before, but there were two things. The first was the four corners of opposition, which is a fantastic tool if you're looking to create interesting dynamics, um, and it allows you to sort of find the story that you're going to tell through your characters, which I'm always a big fan of. Like character first fiction is a big thing for me. And I felt like we got a lot out of that. I'd never used that before, but you seem to really get it.
yeah.
Like you were like, "This is you." I almost heard you everything clicking to place for you, and then all of a sudden we were flying. So I really liked that tool.
Yeah, I thought that was very fun. I do think we'll tweet these out for you guys, the sort of not our ones, but the empty frameworks, if you'd like the sound of them.
Yeah, I mean
Um,
they're readily available, but we'll definitely
yeah,
we can potentially share what we've done on our like Patreon or something.
yeah, I do think there was something because it took me a couple of like taps at it until you said no, you're going too broad. It's this, and I went,
Yeah,
oh, well then this goes in this box, and this goes in
yeah,
this
yeah,
box, and this goes.
yeah. It was like
But
explaining
yeah,
like
it's cool
a
tool.
mathematical process to somebody, then and then them suddenly get it and fill in the whole page of answers. It was really cool.
But, oh, Cincos Tan.
And then the second thing that we did was that we did a story circle, and this is primarily something that is used in TV writing. Dan Harmon famously used it for things like Rick and Morty and Community, I think. Um, but that's essentially it's a bit like plotting out your arc, isn't it? Except it's all on a circle. It's tied in heavily to the like some old concepts of the hero's journey. Um, and I would say that we struggled a bit more with that one. That one felt a bit too prescriptive for us, um,
Yeah,
and that one didn't 100% fly for us. I think we got some stuff from it. Um, in particular, I think we got where we wanted to start the story from that,
yeah,
because we talked about in that first episode we talked about the idea of having a quest gone awry, and that will form the basis of the start of this novella now. So that came in through that bit of the process, but it didn't give us too much else. Anyway, those tools aside, the next thing that we did was that Nico took a first pass at chapter one. Like literally, he had a blank page, just went for it, wrote about 1,000 words, and sent it over to me. Then we proceeded to knock that back and forth with pretty heavy edits, I would say,
yeah,
over and over again. And I think it was starting to cook a little bit. And then we had a little bit of a break, didn't we? Because rather excitingly, Nico's band DMW, Dead Man's Whiskey, had a fantastic tour. In was it primarily in the north of England and Scotland?
yeah. So we had some dates to finish from our tour that started back in November.
Yeah.
Um, so we went up the country. Well, annoyingly up and down and up and down and up and down because why wouldn't you?
What rather than
But
taking it
yeah,
in one
so
line, you sort of doubled back.
yeah, and
You sound thrilled
while
about
the
that.
I loved it, but it does mean you spend an awful lot of time sat in a van, and it feels like, well, that's empty time. I can use that creatively. I can do something positive with that. And then generally, what happens is, so I tend to sit in the front because I get travel sick. So I'm either staying awake so that I can have conversations with our lovely driver, so that he doesn't fall asleep at 3 o'clock in the
Yeah,
morning.
that's bad. You want to
Driving down the
avoid that. I've
motorway.
met your driver actually at a couple of gigs. He's a really nice guy.
He's our drummer's dad, and he's lovely. If you are listening for some strange reason, hello Andy, lovely time
Oh,
having
I
fun
think
with you.
I've met him.
But
Maybe I've met a different
yeah,
guy.
you may have met the guitar tech. But yes, oh no, you met a guy who used to drive for us called Dom.
That's the
Uh,
one.
it's making it sound like we are super successful. We're not. Dom's a friend of a friend, and like I say, the other one is our drummer's dad. We do pay them because we're nice. Point being, I thought, yeah, I'll have plenty of time to do this, thinking I'd be spending more time in the back, and it just didn't happen, which meant I was sort of snatching opportunities to write on my phone in the front of a van, and it just wasn't. It meant that I was holding some bits up, and then, like I say, we write at different times of day, and it meant we were just really struggling to keep the momentum, weren't we? It
Yeah,
was
no, I'd say we pretty much stumbled there, which these things happen. Like life does get in the way of writing sometimes. People need to be resilient
yeah,
to that and work around it. Um, but then I think it was like picking it back up after the tour that took a bit of effort.
yeah,
We had to like re-find it, re-dig in that groove, and also just continue the work that we'd only really just started. So that was a bit of a struggle, I would say. Especially for me, I think there was just something. It took me to reset by writing the prologue, like getting that first draft of the
yeah,
prologue, to really get back in. Um, and we sort of had the reverse, didn't we? Where I wrote the start of the first bit of the prologue, and then we knocked that back and forth. I found generally, as soon as we start knocking things back and forth in a meaningful way, like with you know putting our voice into it, protecting the other person's voice, massaging it for story and tone. That's
yeah,
where the strength of it really was. But yeah, it was hard. It was hard, and as you say, different times of day,
yeah.
not being in the same place. I think that didn't help. And
Yeah, I
yeah,
think sidebarring ideas on Facebook to each other while we're hundreds of miles apart does work for some
hmm
bits, but it's quite hard to find, especially in live conversation like this. Sometimes you'll go, "Oh, what if it's," and it goes faster and faster and faster, and together you find the absolute heart of the concept.
mm,
But when you're knocking it back and forth on, over Messenger, it can really feel like I is that it? I don't know if we found it,
yeah,
especially because you can't feel, you don't get G'd up by the other person's
yeah. There's no
excitement, and
energy, is there?
so it's it feels less impactful, even if you're making huge world decisions. Whereas little tiny in-world details feel huge and fantastic and exciting when you're in person, or at
hmm
least speaking by voice.
Yeah, yeah. And I think just in this is sort of what we struggled with, but what in terms of what we enjoyed about the process so far, I would say that breaking the world building was the most fun I've had. I have enjoyed the writing so far,
Yeah,
and it feels like it's getting better. Like we're picking up steam, and we're building the voice of the story together in a really cool way that I'm enjoying a lot.
yeah.
But the excitement of getting this is going to sound really nerdy, isn't it? But getting those spreadsheets open that because we've taken some cues from past guests, you see, and and putting in world building concepts and building them out, fleshing them out, starting to make a list of characters, starting to make a list of locations, so that we can both be on the same page about who's who and where's what. That's really exciting, and it's a method
Yeah,
of working that I haven't really done before. Um, we've said repeatedly that we're both pantsers, but I think we've found that it's a lot more difficult to both be pantsers when you're co-writing something.
yeah. You can't ride the seat of each other's pants.
Yes. Um, I get,
Otherwise, you just end up with a pair of exposed
oh
asses.
yeah, yeah. I guess it might be possible if you had a situation where like one person was dictating and the other person was typing, and you were in the same room for the whole process. You might be
Yeah,
able to pants co-write something, but I think that's not practical. At least not for us. It's not practical. Um,
yeah,
so yeah, sometimes I felt a bit like I'd write a bit, and then I'd feel a bit like a dog bringing back a stick that had been thrown, and be like, "Look at all these new bite marks in it. Is this good? Is this what you want?"
Meanwhile, I am another dog. I don't know who threw the stick. I'm just waiting for my turn to bite it and hope I do good. The on the world building thing, I think I really liked about it was being pushed and pushing. There's a few concepts in here that we've touched on in those prologue parts that came from us talking about the things we like in fantasy
Yeah.
worlds and sci-fi worlds
Mhm.
and the real world, and saying, well, how do we put our spin on it? So there's stuff in here that I am excited by in the way that I would be if I read it for the first time in someone else's book.
Oh,
And
that's
obviously we
nice.
can't go into it too much on
Yeah.
here, but there are concepts, and I'm pretty sure I mean, they are, the giants are mentioned
Yeah.
in what we read, and their heralds, and the idea of them and what they are and what they do it's one of the most excited I've been about a story idea for a long time. We got so into the world building, I would say, in fact, that we kind of forgot we were meant to be writing about dwarves.
Yeah. No, I definitely like. I think that actually became a problem at one point where we realized that we were spending too much time on the elves and the humans and the giants and the trolls. The trolls in particular, they really took hold. That concept of this
Yeah,
like voracious thing that grows the more it eats and can tear bits off itself to grow new versions of itself. Ugh.
yeah,
Um, yeah, I felt like we took a bunch of you know pretty well established things like elves and dwarves and trolls and stuff, and we're in the process of trying to put our own spin on it, which is important, I think, especially when fantasy literature is, in particular this kind of fantasy literature, it's quite well trodden, isn't it? It's it's well chewed cud,
yeah,
and we want to avoid being sort of tasteless uh, nonsense that I have encountered in other places. So we're trying to make sure
yeah.
that everything's got a bite and everything's got a twist on it, and everything really speaks from what we like about stuff. So that's coming through, I think, and I'm excited to do more of it. 100%, 100%.
I'll say something about co-writing that's come through for us
Oh yeah.
naturally that I would recommend trying if you're co-writing with someone in any way, is to, because it's really easy to get focused on what needs to be changed or what isn't working, but just little complimentary touches about, I like that concept.
Mhm.
I even said to Ben, I like the way you've spelled that.
Yeah.
And it's those little moments, but getting one back is like, oh, good. Yeah, we're onto something then, because my instincts treated me right.
Yeah. I mean, the big one that
And
stuck out for me
yeah,
for you, like in terms of um, a compliment that I gave you whilst we were like deep in the writing process, was the section that talks about how the dwarven language is kind of broken and the bits of it. So we had that from the world building, but the way you described it,
yeah,
this idea that like it like robs the surrounding script of its meaning, these broken bits of words. It really felt like you'd taken what we described, what we decided was going to be the case, and made it work and elevated it. That was really good, really good.
the,
Yeah.
the the other thing I'm learning is, I've spoken before about, I'm super bad at editing, really bad at going through something and working out what should be taken out. You have such a keen eye for it, especially for things like sentence structure. Because we've spoken before about, I have loads of ideas and I just sort of word vomit them, and then I look at it and go, I don't know how to make that make sense. The amount of times I've passed you something and then you've given it back, and it's like, yeah, that's what I was trying to say.
Oh, that's wicked.
That's what I
Well, that
meant.
was what I was trying to do,
And
so
it's
that worked. I'm
yeah,
glad. I'm glad.
it's very cool to have that happen. And I think part of that may be helped by the fact that we've been having conversations for 15 years.
Mm.
I don't want to, I don't like thinking about that number, but it means that a lot of the time, even if I can't quite get the intention out, you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And that's very, it's very cool. It's like it's almost like having a really super powerful AI that I'm like, hey, write me a sentence where I say that this is a thing, and then it's like, okay, oh, a beautifully constructed sentence about that thing that I put.
I'm a living, breathing, walking, fancy chat GPT.
That's
That's
you.
me. Oh, fucking A. Yeah, no, I would say it's been challenging but extremely rewarding so far. And there's so many things that we've gotten
Yeah,
really excited about. Like even down to like what we're gonna do with the words on the page. We've been talking about playing around with different fonts for different bits and different sort of
yeah.
typographical elements and things like that, which I think will make a big difference in the end product. Speaking of which, the current plan for this is that when we finished it, this will be available for free. We're gonna just give this
Yeah.
ebook away. Um, so when the time comes, feel free to share it with as many people as you want because we want as many people to read it as possible because we're going to really pour everything we've got into it. So look out for that.
So on that note, now you've got something to look forward to. We have some work to do. So we'll see you next week with a little bit more story and probably some more tales of making the story itself. See you soon.
Cool. Thanks for joining us for this episode of The Tiny Bookcase.
Remember to subscribe, otherwise you're going to miss out on the future fun.
Also, tell a friend. If you like this episode, link them to it.
We'd be tremendously grateful. You can follow us on Twitter at BookcaseTiny, Facebook at The Tiny Bookcase, and Instagram at BookcaseTiny for updates. Speaking of supporting the podcast, well, magic can only take one so far. The Tiny Bookcase is supported by the generosity of its patrons. Those kind souls have really kept my belly full the last year. Let's cast a spell for them, shall we? For rich ginger tones on their scalp, let us cast the Orangi Hedondo spell for Scott Byrne. And for general fabulousness, why not the Ooh La La How's Your Mother spell on Matthew McLaren?
How do you come up with that shit, man?